Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, soothing nosedive into the side of history that no one asked for. The horrifying, absolutely bonkers world of Victorian STD treatments. That's right, tonight's bedtime journey isn't about knights and castles or gentle rain on a Tudor rooftop. No, we're venturing into a medical fever dream where the cure was usually just as terrifying as the disease. So before we get started, do me a favor, like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this sort of calming, historical weirdness. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe put a fan on for that gentle background hum, and nestle into your clean, medically unremarkable sheets. You might want to keep your legs uncrossed for this one. Just relax and imagine a world before antibiotics, before Google, and before anyone had even invented the phrase that's probably not safe. But let's be honest. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you woke up with a suspicious rash in 1872? Did people actually trust a doctor who looked like he washed his hands in mercury? How many leeches can one man reasonably fit on his you-know-what? Let's not even finish that thought. Did Victorians really think a spritz of vinegar would solve everything from heartbreak to herpes? Could you survive a trip to the apothecary without being prescribed something that glows in the dark? Would you rather have a shot of whiskey or a shot of arsenic? Because in Victorian England, the answer was usually both. Please, congratulations. You've just woken up in the smoggy, bustling heart of 19th century London. It's raining, your boots leak, and you've got a burning sensation that isn't from the gin. Good luck. You blink awake under the soft glow of a gas lamp, the air thick with coal dust and regret. Welcome to Victorian London, a city where the only thing spreading faster than gossip is syphilis, and you're about to become a medical statistic. It's early morning, but the city is already pulsing with the anxious energy of people who have not yet invented the snooze button. Your room, let's call it charmingly compact, is the kind of place that a real estate agent might describe as cozy, and a Victorian would describe as at least it's not the workhouse. You share this single damp chamber with at least 3 other people, a mysterious patch of black mold, and the lingering aroma of last night's boiled cabbage. There is no privacy here, thin walls, thinner curtains, and the ever-present threat of your neighbour, Mr. Puddlewick, loudly hawking up something bronchial in the hallway. Your window, if it opens at all, looks out on a cityscape in perpetual fog. The Thames snakes through the city, shimmering like a ribbon of liquid cholera, and everywhere signs of progress. Plumes of factory smoke, carriages splashing through muddy streets, and crowds moving with determined indifference toward whatever the day demands. It's not just the weather that's grey, everything. Buildings, clothing, sky, even the people, seems dusted with a fine, gritty melancholy. Before you've even left your bed, your senses are overwhelmed. The smell, coal, urine, animal, and cheap gin. The sounds, hoofbeats, clanging bells, hawkers selling cures for a penny, and the eternal background cough of a city that treats tuberculosis like a personality trait. You pull on your least damp pair of trousers, splash your face with water that might actually be more dangerous than whatever is on your bedsheets, and step into the hallway, which is slightly warmer than the outdoors only because there are more humans packed into it. Victorian London is not a city designed for hypochondriacs. But even the most robust constitution is under siege here. Public health is still a radical concept, somewhere between wishful thinking and outright blasphemy. Sewers overflow, drains clog, and rats seem to have a better grasp of urban planning than the men who wear top hats and argue about miasmas in Parliament. On your way to the street, you pass a poster warning about social diseases. illustrated with skeletons, serpents, and the sort of alarming Victorian fonts that suggest the real illness is having too much fun. You know that, statistically, at least 1 in every 10 people on this street is quietly suffering from something that modern medicine would handle with a pill, but that, in 1870, is likely to be treated with a mixture of embarrassment, prayer, and industrial-strength mercury. Let's talk about the water. You're thirsty, but hydration is a risky proposition. The city's famous for its brown, chunky tap water. Most people stick to beer at breakfast, at lunch, during afternoon tea, because boiling is the only reliable filter, and a little alcohol keeps the spirits up when your insides are waging war against the local ecosystem. If you catch a cold, you're prescribed gin. If you don't catch a cold, you drink gin just to take the edge off living in Victorian London. The only thing more common than public drunkenness is public shame. And both flow as freely as the River Thames. There's no escape in the public spaces. The streets are lined with horse dung, and every alleyway has its own unique ecosystem of bacteria and heartbreak. The markets are crowded, noisy, and filled with vendors selling everything from bootleg whiskey to doctor-approved potions, most of which are more likely to kill you than your original symptoms. It's a city where medical advertising is somehow even more aggressive than the rats, and every ailment can be cured, for a price, by someone who claims to have studied medicine in Paris, or possibly just owns a clean apron. That spot? It's probably nothing. Unless you're in 1875, where a rash means public shame, whispered accusations, and a trip to Dr. Quackworthy's office of unsolicited probing. It all starts, innocently enough, just a little itch, a mark where you're fairly sure there wasn't a mark yesterday. Modern you would shrug, slap on some ointment, and Google yourself into a mild panic by lunchtime. But in Victorian London, there is no Google, only suspicion, denial, and the growing awareness that in a world obsessed with respectability, your skin is not just your own, it's public property, open for speculation. You try to ignore it, maybe it's the laundry soap, or the fact that your last bath was in a tepid puddle 3 fortnights ago. But the rash is persistent. It stares back at you in the flickering candlelight, a crimson badge of dishonor. You start covering up more than usual, buttoning your collar to the chin, keeping your gloves on even when you eat soup. But nothing gets past Mrs. Pringle, your landlady, who notices everything and passes judgment like it's her full-time job. Rumors move faster than the horse-drawn omnibuses. It starts small, a lingering glance from your neighbor as you scratch your arm, a child pointing at the telltale spots, whispers in the alley about unwholesome habits. Suddenly, you're starring in your own social scandal, and your rash is the main attraction. Friends avoid shaking your hand. Acquaintances cross the street, and the butcher wraps your meat with an extra layer of paper, just in case. Stigma in Victorian London isn't just social, it's existential. The Victorians adore nothing more than a good scandal, and nothing fuels a scandal like visible evidence. You catch yourself practicing excuses. Just a touch of the hives, Mrs. Pringle, or unfortunate encounter with a nettle, I assure you. But in a world where every spot hints at sin, the unspoken fear is that you've been somewhere, or with someone, you shouldn't. Eventually, denial gives way to dread. You must see a doctor. This, too, is an ordeal. The local surgeon's sign swings in the wind, promising confidential consultation. No judgment, lies. The waiting room is a gallery of anxiety. Men avoiding eye contact, women dabbing at tears with handkerchiefs, and everyone pretending not to notice the constant, nervous scratching. You try to look as nonchalant as possible, but inside, your heart is pounding louder than the doctor's grandfather clock. Victorian medical waiting rooms are not built for comfort. The The furniture is stiff, the air thick with coal smoke, and a single pot plant dies bravely in the corner. Your fellow patients cough, sniffle, and glance suspiciously at anyone with a visible blemish. You scan the room for signs of fellow sufferers. That man with the hat pulled low, the woman with the nervous energy and long sleeves. You all know why you're here, but it's the unspoken rule never to admit it. Finally, you're called into Dr. Quackworthy's consulting room, a sanctuary for the desperate and the doomed. He peers at you over his spectacles, eyes narrowed, moustache twitching in anticipation of fresh gossip. The exam is both brisk and bizarre. He asks how long you've had the problem, whether you've kept good company, and if you've ever travelled abroad, which is Victorian code for admit to everything, and we'll sort it out later. The examination is swift, clinical, and slightly humiliating, involving more prodding and peering than any rash truly deserves. He writes something in a thick ledger, which you secretly hope never becomes public record. Then comes the diagnosis, delivered in a tone halfway between pity and professional disappointment. You'll need a special ointment, he declares, and perhaps some time away from polite society. You leave with a bottle of something that smells like sadness and turpentine, along with the grim knowledge that the only thing spreading faster than your rash is your reputation. Before you trust a doctor, you try everything your aunt recommends. Hot vinegar compresses, mothballs, and reciting poetry backwards under a full moon. Shockingly, the rat persists. Of course it does. Because in 1875, the average Victorian household has more folk cures than actual medical advice. And your extended family is convinced that somewhere, between a mustard poultice and eating raw garlic, there is a secret cure for everything that ails you. The moment a suspicious spot appears, your well-meaning relatives turn into a committee of amateur physicians, each more enthusiastic and less qualified than the last. You try not to panic. Maybe it's just heat rash, you tell yourself. Or a touch of biliousness, as your great-uncle likes to call it. Drink more water, suggests your neighbour, while standing over a bucket filled with what can only be described as liquid cholera. Your mother insists on camphor oil, applied liberally until you smell like a haunted linen closet. And then there's your aunt, who has never met a bodily complaint she couldn't fix with a hot brick wrapped in an old sock. The home remedies multiply. Someone boils nettles and tells you to bathe in the greenish, stinging soup. Someone else insists the only proper way to draw out the poison is to sleep with an onion under your pillow and a cold potato strapped to your calf. A cousin shows up with a jar of pig fat and a look that says, "Trust me, I read about this in a pamphlet." And, because this is Victorian London, everyone recommends gin, taken in heroic doses, for the nerves. The more remedies you try, the worse things get. The vinegar compress leaves you smelling like salad gone off. The mothballs burn. The poetry, well, you were never good at iambic pentameter anyway. Every morning you wake to find the rash exactly as you left it. Only now it's joined by an array of burns, stains, and the lingering suspicion that you are rapidly becoming an amateur chemistry experiment. Denial is a Victorian tradition. The hope is that, if you just ignore the problem long enough, it will quietly pack its bags and leave, taking all evidence with it. After all, acknowledging an ailment, especially one in a sensitive location, means opening yourself up to a social inquisition. Your housemates start watching your every move. If you scratch, they exchange knowing glances. If you look pale, someone offers you a boiled sweet and a prayer. You start to avoid mirrors, and then social gatherings, and finally, daylight altogether. If you absolutely must venture out, you take every precaution. Extra layers, high collars, scarves in July. There's a certain artistry to Victorian self-delusion, a kind of silent agreement that what is not discussed cannot possibly exist. Your uncle, who limps from a minor gout, hobbles by, winks and whispers, "Don't worry, lad, just a touch of the English miasma." He says this while clutching a sachet of lavender to his nose and avoiding any direct sunlight. When denial begins to waver, and it always does, the real fear sets in. You've tried everything in your family's arsenal short of standing on your head during a lunar eclipse, and still the rash remains. You start to worry. Maybe it's not just a rash. Maybe it's something more sinister. Something whispered about behind gloved hands at the market. The words "bad blood" float through your memory like a funeral dirge. You recall hearing about cousin Frederick, sent away to the seaside for his health and never seen again. You remember that, in Victorian London, medical mystery quickly becomes family legend, usually ending with a fainting aunt and a hasty change of subject. At this point, someone always suggests a cure-all tonic, sold by the local apothecary from behind a curtain, and promising relief for everything from rheumatism to romantic disappointment. You drink a bottle of something that tastes like a blend of tree bark and broken promises. When it fails to work, you stare into your cup and contemplate your next move. Stepping inside, you're hit with the scent of carbolic acid, sweat, and pipe smoke. The doctor's hands are suspiciously shiny, and not from soap. He's just been examining the previous patient with the same instruments. You hesitate at the door, but it's too late. You're here now, and in 1875, the only thing more dangerous than Victorian disease is Victorian medicine. The waiting area is a battered wooden bench, polished to a greasy sheen by the collective misery of 1,000 patients before you. There's an old dog snoring in the corner, possibly the nurse, possibly just here for the warmth. The walls are yellowed by years of coal smoke and unsuccessful disinfecting attempts, and a cracked glass jar labelled specimens sits ominously on the shelf, its contents floating like the world's worst pickle jar. Victorian decor is sparse but efficient. A shelf of anatomical drawings, a stack of ledgers thick with secrets, and a bowl of what might be boiled sweets or might just be leftover tonsils. You take a seat, careful not to touch anything, and wait. No one here is making small talk. The man beside you is leaking from an unspecified location. The woman across the room keeps dabbing at her nose with a lace handkerchief that started white but is now aggressively polka-dotted. Soon, the doctor calls you in. Dr. Quackworthy, Esquire, is a man with wild sideburns and a coat that has seen better centuries. He greets you with a brisk handshake, then immediately coughs into the same hand. The examination room is a cabinet of curiosities, bottles of coloured liquids, forceps of every shape, a mysterious saw, and, inexplicably, a stuffed owl. There is no running water. The closest thing to sanitation is a grimy towel draped over a chipped basin, and the disinfectant is just a bottle of gin with the label half peeled off. "Let's have a look, shall we?" he says, gesturing for you to undress behind a faded curtain that provides as much privacy as a wet napkin. Victorian modesty meets medical necessity. You drop your drawers, shivering in the damp air, and wondering how many ghosts of previous patients are haunting this place. The doctor inspects your rash with a magnifying glass, pokes it thoughtfully with the same tongue depressor he used on the last 4 patients, and asks a series of questions about your habits, none of which you answer honestly. He then makes a few notes in his ledger, which is less a medical record and more a running tally of people who might haunt me later. His tools clatter ominously on the tray. Tweezers, a metal probe, and something that looks suspiciously like a dessert fork. No gloves, no soap. Only the vague hope that whatever bacteria you're about to collect will cancel each other out like 2 wrongs making a right. treatment options are as varied as they are terrifying. He recommends mercury ointment, guaranteed to cure what ails you, or, at the very least, distract you from the original problem. Or perhaps you'd prefer a course of leech therapy, still all the rage. If you're lucky, he suggests a poultice of sulfur and pig fat to be applied thrice daily until either your rash or your dignity disappears. The medical bill, presented with great ceremony, is roughly equal to 2 weeks' wages or 1 human soul, whichever you have handy. The doctor prescribes mercury pills, ointments, or maybe just a nice bowl of mercury soup. Side effects may include drooling, trembling, kidney failure, and the occasional unintentional poetry. There is a special place in the annals of medical history for mercury, and it's somewhere between medieval bloodletting and let's drill a hole in your head for the headaches. In Victorian times, mercury was the gold standard for treating what they politely called social diseases. Never mind that it was the chemical equivalent of inviting a tornado to clean your living room. If you were unlucky enough to receive a diagnosis of syphilis, gonorrhea, or anything in between, mercury was what the doctor ordered. Let's start with the basics. Mercury comes in several delightful forms: little silver drops, a gritty grey paste, or, if you're especially unfortunate, a vapor inhaled through something that looks suspiciously like a miniature hookah. The idea is simple. If you can't defeat the disease, at least make it so uncomfortable that you forget what you came in for. The logic seems to be that if you pour enough toxic metal into a patient, the disease will get bored and leave. Or maybe it's just a competition to see what gives out first, the infection or your kidneys. The first stop on the mercury train is usually a pill, taken once, twice, or as often as you can physically tolerate. If pills don't do the trick, the ointments come out. These are smeared liberally onto any and all affected areas. If you're thinking surely not there, I regret to inform you, yes, absolutely there. It burns, it tingles, and you'll smell like a broken thermometer left in a wet cellar. Still not cured? No problem. You can always try a mercury steam bath, where you sit in a wooden box while someone pumps in vaporized mercury. It's like a spa day, if spas were run by supervillains. As for side effects, oh, the Victorians had a word for that. Salivation. If you start drooling uncontrollably, it's a good sign the mercury is working. Tremors? Proof it's getting to those hard-to-reach places. The occasional collapse? A sign of robust constitution. Lose a few teeth? Don't worry, they'll give you a new pair, if you survive the treatment, that is. The average patient begins their mercury cure with high hopes and ends it with a mouthful of ulcers, a nervous tic, and the sort of philosophical musings usually reserved for Shakespearean tragedies. Friends and neighbours notice that you've gone from sprightly to spectral in a matter of weeks. Your hair starts falling out in tufts. You begin composing dramatic soliloquies about the meaning of existence. And the only thing you're cured of is the will to attend social gatherings. Mercury isn't picky. It goes for the whole body. Your gums become spongy, your breath acquires a metallic tang, and your hands start to shake like you've invented the world's first espresso machine. The Victorian physician will nod knowingly and tell you to persist bravely, which is Victorian for good luck. You're on your own now. You might think, surely people caught on. Surely someone questioned why the cure left the patient looking like a haunted marionette. But remember, this is a world where doctors still considered leeches a viable plan B. There's a kind of grim optimism in the Victorian approach to medicine. As long as something happens, it must be progress. No one wanted to die of syphilis, but no one wanted to die of mercury poisoning either. So patients existed in a sort of toxic limbo, hoping the pendulum would swing in their favor. And just when you think you can't possibly ingest another ounce of mercury, the doctor doubles down. A little more can't hurt. Eventually, the mercury cure gives way to the next phase. slow convalescence in a darkened room, curtains drawn, teeth in a jar, and a vague sense that you've lost not just your health, but also your ability to whistle. If you're lucky, you recover. If you're less lucky, you become another cautionary tale, a name in a ledger, a story swapped at the pub, or, if your side effects were especially theatrical, an urban legend. If mercury doesn't work, maybe it's time to apply several dozen leeches right to the affected area. Congratulations. You're now the world's least enthusiastic leech farmer. This is Victorian medicine at its finest. When in doubt, summon the leeches. No matter the ailment, rash, fever, heartbreak, existential despair, somebody will insist that the answer is a bag of small, slimy vampires ready to clamp onto your skin and drain the evil humours away. There's something almost poetic about it. If your idea of poetry involves writhing, blood-sucking nightmares and a deep, personal fear of freshwater ponds, the process begins with a brisk visit to the local apothecary, who keeps his best leeches in a glass jar beside the licorice sticks and the dubious cough syrups. The leeches are sold by the dozen, wriggling and eager, each one named after a distant cousin you hope never to meet. The apothecary assures you that these are the finest French leeches, very discreet, very professional, as if you've just hired a tiny team of personal assistants. Once home, the fun really begins. Victorian leech application is a group activity, best performed with your most trusted family member, or at least someone who owes you a favour. You bare the afflicted area, and yes, for STDs, this means exactly the area you wish no one would ever see again. And prepare for what is charitably described as localized therapy. The leeches are applied, and immediately get to work, latching on with tiny, eager mouths. The sensation is part tickle, part sting, and mostly horror. You're told to lie back and relax while the leeches draw out the bad blood, which is medical code for bleed a lot and try not to think about it. Your helper hovers nearby, holding a bowl for the leeches who finish early and drop off, fat and happy, like the world's worst spa day. Occasionally, a leech refuses to let go, requiring gentle persuasion with salt, or, if that fails, increasingly desperate negotiation. Leeches have been used for centuries, and in Victorian times, they are so popular that leech shortages make the news. Upper-class households keep leech jars beside the family silver. Hospitals maintain special leech nurseries. Somewhere, there is almost certainly a leech-themed lullaby that no one ever sings twice. And just in case you're worried about the medical oversight, rest assured, your doctor will pop in to glance at the proceedings, declare it going well, and return to his sherry before the real bleeding starts. What exactly are the leeches supposed to accomplish? The theory is simple. Illness is caused by an excess of blood or humours in the body, so taking some out is bound to restore balance. The reality is that you end up pale, weak, and vaguely traumatized, with a series of small, circular bite marks that look suspiciously like you lost a wrestling match with a polka-dotted worm. You are advised to rest, hydrate with weak tea, and avoid any activity that might encourage the rash, or your dignity, to return. As the session ends, you count your losses, a pint or so of blood, a portion of your self-respect, and any hope that medicine is about to take a rational turn. The leeches, meanwhile, retire to their little bowl, possibly to write their memoirs or compare notes about your skin. You consider naming them, but decide it's safer not to form attachments. If you're especially unlucky, the area becomes swollen or infected. Proof, your doctor insists, that the leeches have stirred up the constitution. Should you have a mild fever, you're told to drink more broth and apply a mustard plaster. See torture, Victorian style. And if you faint, even better. Means it's working, says your aunt, holding a cold compress and looking for more leeches in the apothecary's catalogue. Eventually, you heal, or, more likely, the disease gets bored and moves on to someone else. You are left with a story, a series of itchy scabs, and the knowledge that when Mercury failed, you could always count on Victorian medicine to offer something even worse. At least your rash has company now. Misery, after all, loves leeches. For that deep warmth, your local healer slaps a mustard plaster directly onto your skin. It burns, it stinks, and now you've got a second rash to keep the first one company. This, dear listener, is what happens when Victorian medicine runs out of both ideas and mercy. The mustard plaster, a concoction of ground mustard seeds, flour, and a splash of water or vinegar, is sold as the one-size-fits-all miracle. Cold? Mustard plaster. Cough? Mustard plaster. Existential dread? You guessed it, mustard plaster. Usually applied by someone with suspiciously thick gloves and an alarming lack of personal boundaries. The preparation itself is a ritual. Your local healer, or perhaps your least favorite aunt, mixes up the pungent paste until it reaches the ideal consistency, somewhere between pancake batter and construction-grade cement. It is then spread, with great ceremony, onto a piece of cloth. There is a lot of clattering, sniffing, and declarations about the invigorating power of volatile oils. By the time the cloth is ready, the entire house smells like a hot dog stand that's been struck by lightning. Now comes the application. You brace yourself as the cloth is pressed against your afflicted skin. At first, it's just warm, a tingly, not entirely unpleasant sensation. This lasts roughly 12 seconds. Then the burning starts. It's a deep, insistent heat, like your skin has been enlisted for a fire brigade and is now on the losing team. There's no escape. You squirm, whimper, maybe try to think positive thoughts about future generations inventing ibuprofen. Your healer assures you that this is a good sign. If it burns, it's working, which is Victorian code for you'll stop complaining when you pass out. You are instructed to leave it on for at least 15 minutes, or until you develop either spiritual enlightenment or first-degree burns. Meanwhile, the mustard vapor seeps into the air, making your eyes water and your nose run. Everyone in the house suddenly remembers an urgent errand outside, leaving you alone with your smoldering regrets. The smell is so intense that even the family dog leaves the room, and you suspect the rash is the only thing still willing to stick around. As the minutes drag on, you begin to negotiate with the universe. If this rash disappears, I promise, I'll stop judging people at the market. The heat becomes excruciating. The skin beneath the plaster turns an angry red, and you realize, with a sense of betrayal, that the original rash was, in fact, the lesser evil. You try to distract yourself by counting ceiling cracks or reciting your most shameful secrets, anything to take your mind off the burning. Eventually, the healer returns, peels off the plaster with the delicacy of a medieval executioner, and inspects your skin. Congratulations! You've survived the Victorian spa treatment. You now have a patch of blistered skin, a brand new rash, and a smell that will haunt your dreams. The original ailment? Unchanged, naturally, but now you're told that your body is releasing toxins, which seems to be the universal excuse for any side effect up to and including spontaneous combustion. If the pain persists, the healer offers round 2, or, for variety, a linseed poultice, or a mustard foot bath for drawing out the vapors. By this point, you're ready to take your chances with the original disease. Your family is sympathetic, in the same way people are sympathetic to someone losing a thumb war. At least you look flushed, they say. That means it's working. You begin to suspect that half of Victorian medicine is just inventing reasons why you shouldn't complain. Later, as you try to sleep, your sheets stick to your raw skin, and every movement reminds you of your healing ordeal. The mustard scent lingers for days. Children avoid you. Neighbors talk. When you finally peel yourself out of bed, you're greeted with a new Victorian paradox. Your body has survived the cure, but your dignity has not. You consider running away to join the circus, but worry they might just use you as a mustard-themed cautionary tale. In the end, you trudge back to the healer for a follow-up, secretly hoping they've run out of condiments. In the grand tradition of history's worst ideas, the mustard plaster stands proudly among the champions. It was the hot take of its day, applied liberally, endured stoically, and remembered mostly for the scars. If you're lucky, you'll recover with only a mild phobia of picnics. If not, well, at least you'll never forget the feeling of being roasted alive in your own parlour. The Victorian prescription: take a hot sulphur bath in the public bathhouse. Bonus: now you're itchy, dizzy, and sharing microbes with your neighbours. Welcome to the Victorian bathhouse, a steamy, echoing chamber where hope comes to get boiled, scrubbed, and occasionally pickpocketed. If you're unlucky enough to have contracted a mysterious rash, and, let's be honest, in Victorian London, you probably are, your physician will suggest a therapeutic soak in sulphur water. Nothing says medical progress like sitting in a communal tub that smells like rotten eggs and old boots, surrounded by strangers, all equally dubious about hygiene and equally desperate for a cure. You begin by undressing in a room that is somehow both cold and humid, watched by a stern attendant who guards towels as if they're made of gold bullion. Modesty here is a suggestion at best. Victorian morality meets its match the minute someone sneezes in your direction, completely unclothed. Your belongings are locked away in a small wooden box, which the attendant assures you is very secure, as he simultaneously eyes your shoes and counts the coins in your purse. The baths themselves are marvels of engineering, if by marvels you mean gargantuan cauldrons filled with tepid mystery. Water is piped in from a healing spring somewhere upriver, which sounds romantic until you remember the last healing spring you saw was downstream from the tanner's yard. The air is thick with steam, sweat, and the unmistakable tang of sulphur, so potent that it coats the inside of your nose for days. There's an orchestra of coughs, splashes, and the occasional shriek as someone realizes that hot is a polite word for scalding. You slide into the water, feeling every pore protest. The bath is meant to open your skin and purge toxins. In practice, it opens your skin to new possibilities: fungal infection, minor theft, and the kind of rash you'll be explaining to your grandchildren. Your fellow bathers eye you with suspicion and camaraderie, all of you united in the shared knowledge that you'd rather be anywhere else. Etiquette dictates that you keep conversation to a minimum, but there is always one fellow, let's call him Chatty Charles, who wants to discuss everything from his most recent boils to the price of cabbages. The sulphur soak is supposed to be therapeutic, but within minutes you're lightheaded and starting to wonder if you've accidentally enrolled in an experimental gas chamber. The dizziness could be the healing working, or just mild poisoning. The attendant checks on you periodically, offering helpful advice like, breathe through your mouth, and if you see spots, let me know. You try to meditate, but the constant sloshing, coughing, and occasional foot brush from a stranger makes inner peace a distant fantasy. After 20 minutes, though it feels like several lifetimes, you're instructed to scrub thoroughly. Soap is provided, but it's more lie than luxury, and it doubles as industrial cleaner when not melting your skin. The communal brushes have seen decades of service and could probably be used to sand a boat. The vigorous scrubbing is said to remove illness, but mostly it removes skin, pride, and any fond memories you had of water. You emerge, lobster red and trembling, convinced you are both cleansed and cursed. the final indignity is the communal rinse. A bucket of cold water dumped over your head, accompanied by the gruff approval of the attendant. "That'll set you right," he says, as you shiver and try to remember your own name. As you dry off with a towel the size of a postage stamp, you realize that you're now sporting not just your original rash, but a bonus selection of new itches, probably acquired from the brush, the water, or Chatty Charles's suspiciously persistent foot. Still, you are assured that this is the height of modern hygiene. You walk home reeking of sulfur, vaguely dizzy, and suddenly nostalgic for the days when clean just meant not actively on fire. Victorian medicine loves a good bathhouse almost as much as it loves public suffering, and if the water doesn't cure you, the experience will certainly give you a new perspective on just how far you'll go for a chance at relief. Or at least, how far you'll go before you swear off public bathing forever. You stop by the apothecary, where everything comes in a handsome bottle with a skull on it. Fancy some arsenic tonic, a little laudanum for the nerves. Side effects include, let's just say, all of them. Victorian London's apothecaries are equal parts pharmacy, curiosity shop, and low-key hazard to public safety. These are not the pastel-lit pharmacies of modern suburbia, with piped-in jazz and discreet consultations. No, this is a dim little cavern of bottles, each one promising miracles, and most delivering a robust selection of new problems instead. The air is thick with the scents of camphor, licorice, and something suspiciously metallic. Somewhere in the back, a cat with a missing ear eyes you warily from atop a crate of questionable liniments. You walk in with a prescription from Dr. Quackworthy, who insists you need a tonic for the blood. The apothecary, a man with eyebrows like burnt toast, and a voice like loose gravel, produces a dazzling array of elixirs. First up is arsenic. Yes, that arsenic. Used in everything from skin creams to health tonics, arsenic is believed to cleanse the complexion, sharpen the mind, and, on a bad day, hasten your return to the earth. The dosage is, to put it gently, a matter of trial and frequent, unpleasant error. Drink too little, and your symptoms persist. Drink too much, and you get to skip straight to your own funeral. Next, he suggests laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, and flavored with hope. It is the Victorian answer to every complaint: coughs, headaches, bad breakups, mysterious spots. Feeling anxious about your rash? Laudanum. Trouble sleeping because you have Victorian problems? Laudanum. Concerned about your growing dependence on laudanum? More laudanum. Side effects include drowsiness, constipation, addiction, and an irresistible urge to write poetry at 3 a.m. The label recommends 1 teaspoon, or until troubles subside. Most patients interpret this generously. Shelves are stacked with patent medicines, each boasting a more impressive label than the last. Dr. Carter's restorative cordial, Mrs. Wilberforce's soothing syrup, Professor Quibb's invigorating elixir. Ingredients lists are less informative and more of a dare. Opium, chloroform, turpentine, camphor, morphine, and a generous dash of secrecy. Some cures are nothing but coloured water. Others could strip paint. In the Victorian era, snake oil isn't an insult. It's a legitimate career path. The apothecary offers you a taste of Spanish fly, a preparation legendary for its supposed aphrodisiac effects. He winks, you hesitate, and he explains, helpfully, that it's made from crushed blister beetles. Stimulating, he promises, or at least memorable. Other options include tinctures of belladonna for the constitution and sometimes the eyesight, bromide salts for the nerves or possibly the nightmares, and a mysterious powder labeled "invigorates the loins, no questions asked." The buying process is a blur of promises, cautions, and half-remembered medical theory. The apothecary is a salesman at heart. guaranteed to work. Or your next bottle is on the house, assuming you're still around to collect it. He wraps your selections in brown paper, weighs them on a brass scale, and ties them with twine, all while sharing anecdotes of customers who were absolutely transformed. He omits the part about how many were transformed into cautionary tales. You stagger home with a rattling bag of medicine bottles, each one a Pandora's box of possible outcomes. The instructions are written in looping script, which seems to get blurrier with every dose. The arsenic tonic tastes of regret and old pennies. The laudanum is alarmingly pleasant, so pleasant that you briefly forget why you were worried in the first place. You try a spoonful of invigorating syrup and promptly lose the feeling in your left foot. Over the next few days, your symptoms don't so much resolve as multiply. The rash is joined by dizziness, bouts of poetic melancholy, and the sensation that you are both floating and sinking at the same time. Your dreams are vivid and deeply concerning. At one point, you find yourself composing a strongly worded letter to the Prime Minister, using only vowels. Still, you persist, because Victorian medicine is nothing if not optimistic. The logic is clear. If one cure doesn't work, add another. Eventually, you're taking a cocktail of substances that would make a modern toxicologist retire on the spot. Your friends comment on your energetic glow. The local vicar begins praying for your soul. When the last bottle runs dry, you're left with a fresh appreciation for clean water, a handful of remaining teeth, and a strong desire never to read another label. You may not be cured, but at least you're interesting, and in Victorian London, that's almost as good as being healthy. Your physician suggests you sit in a steam box filled with vaporized chemicals. Nothing says relaxation like inhaling mystery fumes in a wooden coffin. This is the Victorian spa day. You, mostly undressed, squeezed into a creaking contraption that looks like it was built by a carpenter with a grudge against comfort. Your head sticks out through a small hole at the top, a bit like a human jack-in-the-box. Only instead of being met with laughter, you're surrounded by a cloud of medicinal vapor and the faint scent of burning optimism. The room is lined with peeling wallpaper, and the air crackles with the hiss of boiling cauldrons. Your doctor bustles about, scooping ladles of mysterious liquids into a copper boiler, while explaining, with grave authority, that this particular mixture is guaranteed to drive out the morbid vapors causing your troubles. The list of ingredients is impressive. Turpentine, camphor, carbolic acid, a splash of something labeled elixir of sulfuric wonder, and, because why not, a sprig of rosemary for good luck and better breathing. You are advised to inhale deeply and relax, which is difficult when your lungs are being steamed like an experimental pudding. The vapor seeps in, burning your eyes and tickling your throat. You cough. The doctor nods approvingly and assures you that the reaction proves the treatment is effective. If you start to see swirling colors or develop a sudden urge to confess your worst childhood secrets, that's all part of the therapeutic process. The steam box itself is an experience in enforced stillness. Your arms are trapped at your sides, your knees bump awkwardly against the wooden slats, and your only company is the slow drip of condensation sliding down your back. Occasionally, the doctor checks in, adjusting the dials and promising that the miasma is leaving your body. The miasma, you suspect, is being replaced by a mild case of claustrophobia and a lifetime aversion to all things herbal. Fumigation is the height of Victorian science, at least according to Victorian science. Some boxes are fitted with pipes that deliver healing gases straight from a nearby fire. Other, more advanced versions incorporate gaslight therapy. The doctor flips a switch, and a gentle blue flame flickers to life, illuminating your steam-filled box like a haunted lantern. It's meant to stimulate the skin and spirit, though it mostly stimulates a sense of impending doom. If you're lucky, your session ends with a cooling off period. The box is opened, and you stagger out, dripping and gasping, feeling about as relaxed as a boiled lobster. Your doctor pats you on the shoulder and recommends a brisk walk, a sip of brandy, and perhaps another round of vapor therapy when convenient. You're charged a shilling and reminded to tell your friends about this modern marvel. Afterwards, you wander home in a daze, your hair smelling like a chemistry set, and your clothes clinging to you in new, surprising places. Your skin glows, a reddish hue somewhere between embarrassment and mild chemical burn. The rash? Still there, naturally. But you now possess a deeper understanding of the phrase, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." For days, you relive the experience in your dreams, sometimes as a lobster, sometimes as a Victorian chandelier. Friends comment on your radiant appearance, and you avoid all wooden boxes, steam engines, and teapots for the foreseeable future. The only upside is that, for a brief moment, you are the talk of the neighborhood. That's the one who tried the gaslight cure and lived. Of all Victorian cures, vapor and fumigation stand out for their combination of spectacle, suffering, and sincere belief that more is always better. If your rash doesn't go away, at least you've had a thorough airing out. And if you're feeling brave, or just tired of living with the same skin, you can always go back for another round. After all, the doctor says that 3 treatments is the charm, or was it the limit? Either way, you're definitely breathing easier, if only because you're now afraid to inhale at all. Electricity is all the rage. Maybe a jolt to the undercarriage will shake the disease out, or just cause you to invent breakdancing a century early. Welcome to the height of Victorian medical innovation, where science meets spectacle. And the only thing more shocking than the cure is the bill. In an age obsessed with progress, electricity is the newest, shiniest promise in every doctor's black bag. Never mind that no progress, one's entirely sure how it works, or what exactly it does to the human body. Details are for pessimists. In Victorian London, if you can wire it up and make it buzz, someone will pay you to point it at their most sensitive regions. The clinic is a marvel of brass, glass, and copper wire, all designed to impress and terrify in equal measure. The centerpiece is the galvanic battery, a device that looks like a science fair project built by Dr. Frankenstein's slightly tipsy cousin. There are dials, wires, and several sponges that have seen things they will never speak of. A sign in the corner promises restoration and revitalization for the modern invalid. Another sign, written in smaller print, politely requests that patients sign a waiver and not blame the doctor for unexpected outcomes. Your consultation begins with a questionnaire about your general health, mood, and moral fortitude. Then comes the physical exam, which consists mostly of the doctor waving a metal wand near your rash and saying things like, and curious. The treatment is straightforward. Attach the electrodes, dampen the sponges, and let the healing begin. If you're lucky, the electrodes are placed on your arms or legs. If you're here for social complaints, however, the wiring gets much more personal. The doctor assures you that current stimulates the tissues and excites the vital forces, which sounds great until you realize your vital forces are about to learn the meaning of regret. He cranks a handle and the machine hums to life. You feel a tingle, then a jolt, then a full-body shudder. Muscles twitch, your eyes water. The rash is momentarily forgotten as you experience sensations best described as unpublishable. The doctor watches with scientific interest, possibly taking bets with his assistant about whether you'll faint, scream, or break into spontaneous waltzing. This is all very cutting edge. Electrotherapy is the darling of medical lectures and newspaper advertisements, promising to cure everything from insomnia to nervous exhaustion and, of course, any disease you're too embarrassed to say out loud. Some clinics offer portable batteries, small enough to fit in a handbag, though still heavy enough to double as a doorstop. If you're feeling flush, you can buy a personal electrogalvanic belt, which guarantees round-the-clock buzzing and the lifelong suspicion that you've made a terrible mistake. Victorian faith in electricity is nearly religious. "It is life itself," says the doctor, as you clench the chair arms and try not to bite your tongue off. Side effects are glossed over: temporary blindness, numbness, and increased chance of attracting lightning during storms. "Entirely normal," says the assistant, as he scribbles something about mild hysteria in the ledger. Occasionally, someone claims to be cured after a few sessions. More often, patients report a lingering twitch, a newfound aversion to doorknobs, and a family legend that gets funnier with every retelling. When your session ends, you're instructed to rest and avoid climbing any iron fences. Your doctor recommends weekly treatments, or as often as you feel the need for revitalization. Payment is due up front, and there are no refunds for singed hair or unintended dance moves. You leave the clinic buzzing, literally, and reflecting on the modern wonders of science. Your rash? Still there. Your dignity? A bit fried around the edges. But you can now say you've experienced a genuine Victorian electrical miracle. You spend the rest of the day involuntarily tapping your foot to a rhythm only you can hear, and wondering if the strange tingling sensation in your teeth will ever fade. So, if you ever find yourself nostalgic for the days when medicine was an adventure, remember the brave souls who wired themselves to car batteries in the name of progress. They walked so your electric toothbrush could run, and if all else fails, at least you've got a great excuse the next time someone asks why you flinch every time you see a thunderstorm. If all else fails, doctors recommend bed rest. Weeks of it. No stimulation, no friends, just grey gruel and existential dread. Amazingly, this does not cure you. The rest cure is the ultimate Victorian fallback, reserved for when every other treatment, mercury, leeches, mysterious fumes, or boiling yourself in sulphur, has not, to anyone's surprise, worked. The prescription? Lie perfectly still. The logic: if you just stop doing anything, maybe your rash, your melancholy, and your reputation will quietly heal themselves. It's medical minimalism, minus the dignity. Your room is stripped of anything interesting. Curtains are drawn to keep out the light. And, presumably, joy. Any books, letters, or evidence of hobbies are confiscated. The only entertainment allowed is watching the dust motes float through the air, or listening to your own thoughts, which quickly become your worst enemy. Visitors are discouraged. Your doctor says conversation is too stimulating for the nerves. If anyone does stop by, it's usually to say things like, "You look pale," or "still not better then," before retreating to spread updates about your invalid state across the neighborhood. Diet is part of the cure, which is Victorian, for let's make this as bland as possible. Breakfast is tepid porridge, lunch is boiled turnips, and supper is an uninspired affair involving bread that doubles as a doorstop. If you're lucky, there's a thin broth. If you're less lucky, it's just more gruel, ladled out by a nurse whose bedside manner hovers between bored and mildly resentful. Water is the only drink allowed, and even that is rationed to avoid undue excitement. The highlight of your day is often a single stewed apple, which everyone agrees is medicinal. The daily routine is strictly enforced. Rise at dawn, remain horizontal, and avoid anything resembling fun. The doctor visits, but only to check your pulse, tesk disapprovingly at your lack of progress, and adjust your pillows. Sometimes he brings a notebook and writes delicate constitution or restless spirit before leaving you to ponder what either of those phrases means for your future. There is a strict ban on laughter, loud noises, and anything that might count as emotional expression. Even sighing too deeply is discouraged. You have hours, days, weeks to contemplate your decisions. The wallpaper patterns become your soap opera. You memorize every crack in the ceiling and invent elaborate backstories for the spiders in the corner. Sometimes you overhear the servants downstairs discussing the weather or speculating about your mysterious ailment. The neighbors wonder if you're wasting away from heartbreak or something much more scandalous. Gossip fills the void your life once did. Meanwhile, your rash continues to do what rashes do: persist. Sometimes it even gets worse. Bed rest, as it turns out, is not a miracle cure for actual disease, but it is an excellent way to develop a new appreciation for boredom, bed sores, and the healing power of a brisk walk, none of which you're allowed. The only thing being cured is your will to get up ever again. As the weeks stretch on, you notice your mind wandering to strange places. Is this what convalescence means? You wonder if you'll ever feel sunlight again, or if the rest cure is just a slow march toward becoming part of the furniture. You count the days by the number of times the nurse changes your chamber pot. The smell of boiled turnip haunts your dreams. Eventually, the doctor decides you've had enough. Perhaps your rash has faded a little, or perhaps he's simply bored of making house calls. You're given permission to rise, slowly of course, and re-enter society. Your legs wobble, your appetite is gone, and your sense of humor has been replaced with a lingering suspicion of all things restorative. You leave your sickbed with a profound appreciation for freedom, flavor, and the right to decide when you get up in the morning. The rest cure hasn't cured you, but it has taught you the limits of Victorian patience and just how badly you need a cup of real tea, a strong newspaper, and a friend who won't gasp at your complexion. You visit a friend who reassures you everything's clean. Nobody's heard of condoms, but everyone's got advice, and at least 2 contagious diseases. Welcome to the Victorian brothel, where the candles are dim, the beds are squeaky, and the concept of safety first has yet to be invented. The clientele range from dock workers to dukes, and the house rules are simple. Pay in advance, don't break the furniture, and don't ask too many questions about what happened to the previous occupant of your bed. In an era before germ theory really caught on, the standard of cleanliness is, let's say, optimistic. The sheets are changed when they begin to move of their own accord, and the only antiseptic in sight is a well-watered jug of gin. Your friend, let's call her Violet, is confident, clever, and experienced in all the ways that matter. She assures you that everything's perfectly safe, which, in Victorian London, means she's at least heard of soap and knows how to avoid the really obvious hazards. Still, advice flies faster than the rumours. For every just wash with vinegar, there's a rub yourself down with carbolic acid, or don't kiss anyone with freckles. None of these suggestions work. All of them burn. No one, it seems, is actually protected. In place of actual prophylactics, the brothel offers, well, nothing. Condoms exist, but they are made from sheep gut or fish bladder, hand-stitched and sold at a premium. Most men consider them a novelty, something to joke about rather than use. A few curious souls buy one, only to discover that it's reusable, needs to be tied off with a ribbon, and smells like a haunted butcher's shop. The result? Condoms are more often displayed than deployed, and disease spreads faster than scandal. But the real hazard isn't what you see, it's what you can't. Germs, bacteria, and viruses are still mysterious villains, rarely acknowledged in polite conversation and completely absent from public health policy. Most doctors still cling to the idea of bad air and unwholesome humours. The brothel, meanwhile, relies on brute optimism, daily sponging, and the occasional sprinkling of rosewater. The house madam believes in lavender sachets, open windows, and, if things get especially dire, a coat of whitewash. Everyone in the building is an expert in home remedies. Violet swears by a shot of brandy and a garlic poultice. Another girl says the best defense is keeping your stockings on and your mouth shut. The men are no better, boasting about secret tinctures purchased from apothecaries and tonics that taste like soap, sulfur, and lies. After each encounter, you're encouraged to wash up at the communal basin, a bowl of tepid water, and a rag that has seen more action than half the dock workers in Wapping. But here's the paradox. For all the whispered advice, none of it stops the steady churn of disease. Gonorrhea and syphilis pass from patron to patron, the only true winners in this busy marketplace. Violet jokes that if you spend enough time in the brothel, you'll eventually build up an immunity to everything but heartbreak and the rent. Sometimes the local doctor makes his rounds, offering lectures and pamphlets, but he's more interested in collecting stories than preventing infections. And yet, people keep coming back. The brothel is a haven from the outside world, a place where judgment is left at the door, and everyone shares in the same risky dance. Maybe it's the comfort, the companionship, or just the chance to forget for a few hours that outside these walls, respectability is everything. Here, your secrets are safe, your sins are ordinary, and your diseases, well, those are just part of the price of admission. When you finally leave, you do so with a head full of advice, a pocket full of regret, and a very strong urge to bathe in something stronger than vinegar. Germ theory may be on holiday, but at least you got a story out of it. In Victorian London, sometimes survival is just about picking the least terrible option and hoping your next visit to Dr. Quackworthy doesn't include another round of leeches. Out on the street, vendors hawk miraculous French cure tonics, Spanish fly, and Dr. McGillicuddy's invincible balm. All promise a cure. Most deliver a hangover. Welcome to the patent medicine parade, where every street corner is a carnival, every bottle is a miracle, and every salesman is a performer with a tragic lack of medical credentials. In Victorian London, the pharmacy comes to you, shouting, singing, and waving banners in the chilly fog. You can't walk 5 steps without someone offering you a bottle, a promise, and a very vague guarantee that whatever ails you will be gone by morning. Or by the time you realize you've been swindled, you wander through the crowd, drawn to a man in a velvet hat with a moustache that could sweep a chimney. He's balancing on a crate, holding up a glowing bottle. Dr. McGillicuddy's invincible balm, good for the joints, the nerves, the skin, and, if you rub it hard enough, your conscience. The label is a riot of fonts, promises, and inspirational quotations. There are testimonials too. My rash is gone, claims Mrs. Pratt, whose only medical degree is in creative storytelling. Next up is the French cure, a syrup of uncertain origin, bright green and fizzing ominously. It's sold as a surefire solution for gentlemen's troubles, and its ingredients list reads like a scavenger hunt at the apothecary. Quinine, camphor, oil of wintergreen, and a dash of the continent's secret. One sip, and you know for certain that the real secret is industrial-grade alcohol. There's Spanish fly, which every waggle-browed peddler insists is an invigorating aphrodisiac. They neglect to mention that it's made from ground blister beetles. And the main effect is an urgent need to find the nearest privy and reconsider your life choices. For those too shy to inquire, anonymous cures are available by mail. Just send a coin and a letter describing your mysterious malady, and a box of hope, and probably disappointment, arrives a week later. Vendors compete for your attention with ever more outlandish claims. Dr. Toothworthy's elixir of youth, Mrs. Popplewell's nerve tonic for ladies only, Professor Bigglesby's scurvy syrup, made with real imported lemons and a shot of gin. Each comes with a handbill crammed with fine print and a money-back guarantee that no one will ever honour. There are miracle plasters you can slap on your chest, vital powders to mix in your tea, and pills that promise to flush out the devil's mischief, but mostly just flush out your pocketbook. The real draw is the show. Every bottle comes with a story, a demonstration, and a slightly too enthusiastic customer planted in the crowd. Watch as old Tom drinks a pint of Dr. Puddlewick's restorative and sprints down the street. Never mind that he was running before he drank it, mostly to avoid paying. There's a band playing, children laughing, and at least 3 people arguing about whether snake oil is made from actual snakes. You sample a free spoonful of something labeled soothing cordial, which tastes of licorice and regret. By the time you reach the next stall, you're feeling lightheaded and a little sentimental, possibly because you've just consumed your weekly allowance of opium. A woman presses a jar of ointment into your hands. For the skin, the soul, and stubborn husbands, you thank her, unsure whether to apply it or just carry it for protection. At the end of the day, your pockets are lighter, your symptoms unchanged, and your head buzzing from an unholy cocktail of camphor, spirits, and false hope. But the spectacle is unforgettable. In the world of Victorian medicine, cures may be imaginary, but the need for hope is very real. And sometimes, a good story and a bad hangover are all the relief you get. Desperate? It's time for silver nitrate. Picture a medical swab, some searing pain, and the sudden urge to make a lifelong vow of celibacy. This is where Victorian medicine drops the act. All the laudanum and snake oil, the hot mustard and polite tonics fall away, leaving you with the most direct and excruciating cure they can offer. Silver nitrate is the medical equivalent of the nuclear option. When nothing else has worked, and your rash is beginning to draw worried looks from strangers and small children, the doctor proposes the stick, and not the gentle kind either. This one is dipped in chemistry and bad intentions. Your consultation is brief. The doctor, ever brisk, tells you that a touch of silver nitrate will cauterize the affliction at its source. You nod, feeling brave, until you see the tool. It's a long, thin rod, tipped with a grey-black substance resembling a sinister birthday candle. There is no anesthetic, because it's 1878, and pain, apparently, is just character building. You are advised to look away and breathe deeply. You do both, clenching the edge of the table, trying not to imagine how many other nervous souls have left claw marks here before you. The application is mercifully swift and memorably terrible. The doctor swabs the rash, and instantly your entire nervous system decides to file a complaint. There's a burning, biting, metallic sensation that manages to be both hot and cold. For a moment, you consider confessing to every sin you've ever committed just to make it stop. The smell, something between singed hair and pennies, fills the room. While the doctor nods and assures you this is all perfectly ordinary, your urge to flee the building is only matched by your determination never to trust anyone in a white coat ever again. Afterwards, the doctor offers you a glass of water, which you fail to hold because your hands are still shaking. He explains that silver nitrate sterilizes and stimulates healing, though it mostly seems to sterilize your enthusiasm for future medical adventures. You are told not to touch the area, not to wash it, and not to ask too many questions. The treatment site turns a charming shade of black, which the doctor insists is a good sign. You try to avoid looking at it, but curiosity wins, and now you're haunted by the image forever. As you limp home, the pain blossoms anew every time you walk, sit, or think about your life choices. You decline all invitations to socialize. Friends wonder if you've joined a monastery. The landlady whispers that you've had a fright. You consider telling her the truth, but realize it's easier to claim you were mauled by a wild animal than to explain silver nitrate to someone whose idea of medicine is tea and prayer. The days that follow are a mix of relief and paranoia. The spot slowly heals, but the memory remains. You're constantly checking for new symptoms, convinced that if another rash appears, you'll run away to the countryside and live as a hermit. At the same time, there's a grim sense of pride. You survived Victorian cauterization, and now you feel that nothing short of the apocalypse could surprise you. Meanwhile, you overhear other patients at the apothecary, swapping silver nitrate horror stories. Each tale is more dramatic than the last. "Mine blistered for a week," says one. "The pain gave me religion," says another. There is a silent bond among survivors, a brotherhood forged in agony and dubious hygiene. In the end, your rash is gone, probably more from fear than from science. You carry the scar like a badge of honor, or maybe a warning. The next time a Victorian doctor offers you a minor procedure, you'll know better. Or you'll at least insist on 2 shots of gin before the first swab. In Victorian England, pain was proof you'd been treated. If you're lucky, it was also proof you'd been cured. You're out of money, so it's off to the charity ward. The beds are full. Privacy is a myth, and your nurse is armed with bandages, optimism, and absolutely zero pain relief. Welcome to the Victorian Charity Hospital, where hope limps in on crutches and dignity stays outside in the rain. The building itself is grand from a distance, all Gothic arches and pious inscriptions, but up close it smells of boiled cabbage, disinfectant, and desperation. The entrance hall is crowded with every variety of affliction: coughing children, weeping mothers, and men clutching mysterious packages wrapped in rags. The only thing everyone has in common is a lack of funds and the willingness to endure just about anything for a shot at free care. The charity ward is a marvel of organized chaos. Dozens of iron beds line the walls, separated by thin curtains that exist mainly as decoration. There is no such thing as privacy. Every groan, sneeze, and midnight confession is public property. The patients share everything: germs, gossip, and, if you're unlucky, lice. The din is relentless, coughing from one corner, prayers from another, and the distant clatter of surgical trays. The ward's chief virtue is that there are no mirrors, so you can't see how dreadful you look. Your nurse, Sister Mercy, runs the ward with the brisk efficiency of a sergeant major and the optimism of a saint. She wraps wounds, dispenses advice, and changes bedsheets with a speed that suggests she's competing for a prize. But what she has in speed, she lacks in supplies. Bandages are reused, painkillers are reserved for amputations, and morphine is as rare as a polite rat. The preferred anesthesia for minor procedures is bite this stick and think happy thoughts. Meals are functional at best. Grey gruel for breakfast, grey soup for lunch, and for dinner, something that might once have been a turnip. Tea is served weak and lukewarm, but if you smile sweetly at Sister Mercy, you might get an extra biscuit, assuming no one else is watching. Water is doled out with caution. Too much. And you'll just need to visit the privy, which is more of a rumour than a reality. The doctors arrive for rounds with the grandiosity of minor royalty. Their coats are stained, their hands suspiciously unwashed, and their stethoscopes are mainly for show. Each visit is a performance. A rapid-fire exchange of Latin, a poke here, a prod there, and a stern lecture about clean living. Sometimes they argue about the best course of treatment, and you get the sense that you're witnessing an amateur improv troupe in action. If you're lucky, they'll decide on a course of mercury or a brisk bloodletting. If you're unlucky, it's time for experimental therapy, which usually just means a bigger needle. Despite it all, there's a certain camaraderie among the patients. Misery, after all, loves company. Stories are traded between beds, alliances are formed, and the bravest souls sneak out at night to smuggle in treats from sympathetic visitors. The ward is as much support group as infirmary, united by the collective hope of surviving another day, and eventually escaping back into the bustling chaos of London. Recovery here is measured not in days, but in increments. The first night you sleep without coughing, the first meal you keep down, the first joke you manage to laugh at without doubling over. Some never leave, lost to complications, infection, or just the exhaustion of trying to get well in a place that feels designed to keep you sick. For those who do, the charity ward becomes a strange badge of honor, a story to be told in hushed tones, proof that you've survived not just your illness, but the worst Victorian medicine had to offer. And when you're finally discharged, clutching your bundle of possessions and your hard-won health, you walk out through the iron gates, take a deep breath, and vow never to return, unless, of course, the rash comes back. It isn't just your body that aches. Everyone treats you like a walking cautionary tale. The cure for public shame? There isn't one. In Victorian London, disease is never just physical. If you find yourself with a suspicious rash, persistent cough, or even a limp that's a little too mysterious, your reputation suffers almost as much as your health. No matter what the doctor says, the neighbors will diagnose you with a character flaw, and the prescription is relentless. Gossip, avoidance, and the kind of subtle social exile that only the British can truly perfect. It starts in the street. People you've known for years suddenly cross to the other side when you approach. The butcher, once eager to sell you a nice cut of mutton, now wraps your parcel twice and hands it to you as if he's delivering explosives. The grocer eyes you warily, certain you'll taint the apples just by breathing on them. Even the children who once begged for pennies and stories keep their distance, their mothers whispering warnings behind gloved hands. The source of your troubles isn't just the rash, it's what the rash represents. In an era obsessed with respectability, every visible blemish or bout of illness hints at bad behavior. The logic is cruelly simple. If you're sick, you must have done something to deserve it. Maybe you went somewhere you shouldn't. Maybe you kept the wrong company, or failed to pray hard enough. Maybe, most damning of all, you enjoyed yourself too much at a Christmas party last year. Whatever the cause, the effect is the same. Your character is now in question. Doctors, too, are complicit. A visit for a private matter quickly turns into a moral interrogation. "How did you come by this affliction?" asks Doctor Quackworthy, with eyebrows arched high enough to launch a career in theatre. He scribbles mysterious notes in your file, always within earshot of the nurse, who will absolutely tell her sister, who will absolutely tell the whole parish. There's a special look reserved for patients with those sorts of problems, equal parts pity, suspicion, and just a dash of self-congratulation. No amount of explanation can change their minds. If you're unlucky, your diagnosis comes with advice about clean living and finding a more wholesome circle of friends. Home isn't much safer. The family responds with a complicated cocktail of concern and shame. Your mother lectures you about the importance of modesty and proper companions. Your father clears his throat a lot and avoids eye contact. Even the cat won't sit on your lap. Meals grow quieter, invitations disappear, and suddenly your diary is painfully, ominously empty. A cousin may offer you a pamphlet about the dangers of impurity, complete with woodcuts of sinners wailing in the flames. It's Victorian motivation at its most cheerful. Religion, naturally, offers its own diagnosis. The priest includes a pointed aside in his next sermon about the consequences of moral failing, gazing directly at your pew. Charity is offered, but always with a reminder that true healing comes from repentance, not just ointments or tonics. If you do recover, your reputation may not. Some stains never wash out, especially the invisible ones. Even after the rash fades, the echo of judgment lingers. Neighbors still lower their voices when you pass. A would-be suitor, previously attentive, finds reasons to keep his distance. Old friends hesitate before inviting you for tea. In a city obsessed with public image, your private suffering has become your defining feature. The rumor mill needs no facts, only the faintest hint of scandal to keep turning. Yet somehow, life goes on. The world spins, the bells ring, and eventually the next gossip-worthy event distracts the masses. Someone else is caught stealing turnips, or there's a scandal about the vicar's missing socks. You, meanwhile, develop a thicker skin and a new appreciation for anonymity. In the end, you learn that in Victorian London, the hardest illness to shake is other people's opinion. And for that, history offers no remedy at all. Do you tell your partner? Do you confess to your fiancé? Or do you just hope the rash is just a chill? Welcome to the most awkward Victorian dinner party ever. There's a particular tension to Victorian courtship, even on the best of days. Add an unexplainable rash to the mix, and suddenly love is less about sonnets and stolen glances, and more about strategic scarf placement and creative excuses. You become a master of distraction, pouring tea with one hand while scratching discreetly with the other. Praying your partner's eyesight is as poor as their sense of humor. The art of secrecy is everything. Victorian etiquette insists that conversation remain cheerful, gentle, and above all, superficial. You can discuss the weather, the wallpaper, or the Duke's terrible taste in hats. But personal maladies are strictly off the menu. This creates a high-stakes game of charades, where the trick is to hide your symptoms while acting like nothing's amiss. If you're lucky, your beloved assumes you're simply shy. If you're less lucky, they suspect you're hiding something darker, like a secret fondness for Methodism, or a previous engagement to a Frenchman. Do you tell them? It's not as easy as it sounds. A Victorian confession is no simple matter. There are no heart-to-hearts over candlelight. No, we need to talk text messages. You weigh your options. If you confess, you risk not only your reputation but theirs. A single rumor can end an engagement, close doors, and make you the cautionary tale for generations. If you say nothing, you risk passing on your troubles, and the secret will fester between you, unspoken and ever-present, like the world's most depressing family heirloom. Family is no help at all. Parents are masters of the strategic cough and the lingering stare. Mothers hover, dropping hints about good breeding and choosing wisely. Fathers warn about weak constitutions and the importance of discretion. Siblings snoop, servants gossip, and Aunt Mildred seems to know things about everyone, including you. By the time dinner is served, everyone is on edge, silently evaluating each other for suspicious rashes, mysterious sniffles, or a slight limp. The engagement period, already a minefield of social expectation, becomes a nightmare of guilt and paranoia. You invent ever more elaborate excuses for avoiding intimacy. A cold, a headache, a sudden passion for cold baths. Your fiancé worries you've lost interest, while you worry you've lost your mind. The entire relationship becomes a melodrama, one where no one knows their lines and everyone suspects they're about to be written out. For the married, secrecy takes on a different shape. The marital bed becomes a battleground of side glances and careful avoidance. You wonder if your spouse suspects anything, or if they're simply relieved by the new arrangement. Some couples develop unspoken agreements: don't ask, don't tell, don't ever mention the word rash. Others fall into suspicion and accusation, turning every unexplained illness into a source of marital drama. For women, the stakes are even higher. A wife accused of bringing shame risks everything: her security, her standing, even custody of her children. When, inevitably, the truth comes out, whether through an indiscreet friend, a nosy servant, or an unmissable outbreak, the results are explosive. Accusations fly, tears are shed, tea is spilled, sometimes on purpose. The neighbors, already halfway to a theory, waste no time in updating the entire street. Relationships are broken, patched, or simply resigned to a quiet, companionable misery. And yet, amidst the chaos, there are moments of grace. Some partners are forgiving, some marriages survive, and some romances weather the storm. Perhaps it's the shared sense of surviving something together, or perhaps it's just Victorian stubbornness. Either way, the memory of that dinner party lingers forever. Every awkward silence, every stifled cough, every too bright smile. In Victorian London, love is never simple, and secrets never stay secret for long. All you can do is hope that, in the end, your heart proves hardier than your immune system. Turns out, the mercury didn't work. Now you've got sores, a fever, and a gnawing suspicion that medical science is really just a Victorian-themed escape room. Welcome to the next chapter of your 19th century health odyssey. Stage 2 Syphilis. The sequel nobody asked for. The early optimism you felt as you choked down mercury pills and endured burning ointments has evaporated, replaced by a set of new symptoms that seem designed specifically to ruin your week. You're achy, shivery, and sprouting sores in places that make you long for the innocent days when your worst problem was Mrs. Pringle's judgmental stare. Stage 2 is the phase where syphilis throws a party and invites every part of your body. You break out in angry red spots, your hair begins to thin in strange patterns, and your tongue looks like it's auditioning for a medical textbook. Fever and malaise set in, along with that all too familiar feeling that something else will soon go wrong. In Victorian England, these are politely described as secondary symptoms. In plain English, you look and feel like you've been cursed by a particularly vengeful wizard. Back you go to Dr. Quackworthy, who is running out of both ideas and facial expressions. He examines your new collection of sores and says things like curious and most uncommon. He prescribes a new round of remedies, each more daunting than the last. Arsenic tonics, silver nitrate swabs, and, for the truly brave, a stint in the vapor box. You start to realize the real goal of treatment isn't so much to cure you, but to make you nostalgic for your old symptoms. Your social life, meanwhile, deteriorates rapidly. Friends avoid your handshake, dinner invitations dry up, and your neighbors become very interested in disinfecting their doorknobs. Any unexplained cough or patch of redness is now regarded as evidence of your bad character. Even your most supportive relatives start eyeing you like a suspicious sausage. You begin to miss the days when your only secret was a fondness for plum pudding. Physically, you're exhausted. The fever keeps you up at night, and the sores keep you humble. The Victorians, ever resourceful, have a pamphlet for this too. Living with Your Lumps. A Guide to Modesty and Disguise. The advice ranges from wear higher collars to consider a strategic mustache. If you're a woman, the best advice is to avoid scrutiny and take up knitting. If you're a man, it's work harder, complain less, as if sheer willpower and brisk walks can defeat bacteria. The treatments become a full-time job. You spend hours applying ointments, boiling linens, and contemplating the meaning of life. Your bedroom starts to look like a small apothecary, bottles crowding the table next to your bed, each promising a new beginning and delivering only fresh disappointment. Some days, you consider trying folk remedies, an onion poultice, a tea of boiled nettles, or perhaps just moving to the countryside and changing your name. In rare moments of humour, you find yourself joking with fellow sufferers at the apothecary. Syphilis? "Oh, I'm just collecting the set." You share stories of disastrous treatments and commiserate about the ongoing adventure of Victorian healthcare. You realize you're part of a club, exclusive, unfortunate, and remarkably resilient. As the weeks drag on, you learn a few things. First, Victorian medicine is a lot like a board game where all the cards say, "Go back 3 spaces." Second, if you survive this stage, you deserve a medal, a stiff drink, and maybe a letter of apology from the Royal College of Physicians. And third, hope somehow endures. The human body is stubborn, and even as science fumbles, you keep going. The adventure continues, whether you like it or not. And each new day brings the hope, however faint, that something, finally, will work. The doctor reaches for the hypodermic and a bottle of carbolic acid. The treatment is exactly what you fear it is. And yes, there are no anesthetics. Victorian medicine is full of terrible surprises, but this one takes the top prize. Just when you think you've endured every indignity, from leeches to mustard plasters, your doctor rolls up his sleeves and introduces you to the most terrifying tool in his cabinet, the syringe. With a reassuringly brisk tone, Dr. Quackworthy explains that direct injection of caustic chemicals is the cutting edge of science, because nothing says innovation like stabbing someone in the worst possible place with a needle filled with burning liquid. The process is explained in the gentlest of terms. You may experience mild discomfort, the doctor says, as he draws a generous portion of carbolic acid into the glass syringe. Mild discomfort is Victorian for "try not to scream so loudly the nurse drops her tea." There's no local anesthesia. You are encouraged to think pleasant thoughts or, failing that, to bite down on your handkerchief and pray for a blackout. The procedure itself is as quick as it is excruciating. The doctor locates the affected region, swabs it with something that smells suspiciously of turpentine, and inserts the needle with the confident, practiced hand of someone who's done this far too many times. The burning starts instantly, a white-hot surge of pain that goes from unpleasant to existential crisis in 3 seconds flat. You clutch the edge of the table, eyes watering, the urge to levitate suddenly very real. Meanwhile, Dr. Quackworthy is already preparing for round 2. Multiple injections may be required, just to make absolutely certain that every microscopic germ has received the memo. Victorian medicine means business. We want to sterilize the passage, the doctor explains. Which sounds reassuring until you realize you're being treated more like a laboratory flask than a human being. After the injections, there's the aftercare, if you can call it that. You're handed a bottle of antiseptic, the kind used for cleaning floors, a few rags, and instructions to keep the area clean and avoid unnecessary excitement. Walking home is an ordeal. Sitting is unthinkable. Standing is only possible if you don't mind explaining to curious onlookers why you're wincing every time a carriage goes by. Your friends ask what's wrong, and you mutter something about a bit of the rheumatism before hobbling away as fast as possible. At night, the pain throbs like a tiny drum solo, and you question every decision that led you here. You try every home remedy, cool compresses, camphor oil, gentle prayers. Nothing helps. The injection site is swollen, angry, and has developed a will of its own. The rash, you note with bitter amusement, seems entirely unbothered by all of this. Perhaps it's even spreading, out of sympathy or spite. Social life becomes a distant memory. Invitations are refused. Pubs are avoided. Even the local stray cats give you a wide berth. Your doctor, undaunted, assures you that a little discomfort is proof of healing. You begin to suspect that the only thing Victorian medicine cures is your desire to ever visit a doctor again. Yet, somehow, you persevere. Days pass, and the pain begins to fade, though your trust in medical science never quite recovers. You gain a new appreciation for baggy trousers, long overcoats, and polite fiction. You start a club, unofficially, with others who have suffered similar fates. The initiation ceremony is simple. You look each other in the eye, nod, and never speak of it again. And so, with one more story to never tell your grandchildren, you survive the most dreaded treatment Victorian medicine has to offer. The next time someone boasts about their bravery in the face of a flu shot, you'll smile, sip your tea, and know they have absolutely no idea. If you're a woman, the diagnosis is nervous exhaustion. The cure: isolation, suspicion, and possibly a course of female pills made of lead and arsenic. The Victorian approach to women's health is a masterpiece of double standards and medical guesswork. If you so much as sneeze in public, there's a strong chance someone will declare you delicate. If you exhibit any symptoms beyond saint-like patience and a gentle pallor, you are suffering from female troubles. A category so vague it includes everything from cramps to existential terror to, inconveniently, actual sexually transmitted infections. Begin with the diagnosis. It's rarely spoken aloud. Men's ailments are gallant indiscretions. Women's complaints are weakness of constitution, nervous fits, or hysteria, which in medical terms means we have no idea. But it's probably her fault. Your rash is rebranded as a touch of nerves or perhaps the vapors. If you complain too much, you risk being prescribed bed rest in a dark room, where you are to avoid all visitors, laughter, and sunshine, and consume nothing but thin broth and the occasional female tonic brewed by a man who has never met a uterus. But perhaps your luck is especially dire. The family physician, eyes narrowed with professional concern, produces a small box of pills made with lead, arsenic, or both. The labels read, "For ladies only," as if the ingredients know which gender they're poisoning. You are advised to take these pills morning, noon, and night, with a glass of water and a prayer that you won't start glowing in the dark. Side effects include headaches, fainting, and improved moral character, which seems to mean silence, compliance, and a very high pain threshold. Should you question the treatment or the diagnosis, you're met with condescending reassurance. Best not to trouble yourself with details, the doctor says. Women are simply more sensitive. If you protest, your case is escalated to incorrigible, and you may be sent to a sanatorium, Victorian code for out of sight, out of mind. There, you'll be given more pills, more lectures, and possibly a round of the infamous rest cure, which is exactly as fun as it sounds. Society, meanwhile, is watching closely. If you're unmarried, you're a cautionary tale. If you're married and ill, you're a source of shame or, worse, suspicion. Husbands sometimes consult doctors in private, concerned their wives are overwrought or prone to fancies. Any mention of actual symptoms is carefully avoided at the dinner table, though it's the main course in the servants' gossip. And if a woman is brave enough to visit the doctor alone, expect a full report sent home, complete with dire warnings about future prospects and protecting the family name. All the while, the burden of secrecy falls heavily. You learn to smile through discomfort, to hide your symptoms with lace and long sleeves, to pretend you simply don't have much of an appetite. If your health improves, it's credited to the doctor's wisdom. If not, you are gently reminded that some women are simply fragile. In truth, most are anything but, forced to endure not only their ailments, but the suspicion and isolation that come with them. Even when remedies are marketed specifically to women, the advice is laughable. Pamphlets urge fresh air, gentle exercise, and moderate cheerfulness. If only a brisk walk and a positive attitude could cure arsenic poisoning. The irony is not lost on you. The system is designed to keep women quiet, compliant, and preferably horizontal. By the end of your ordeal, you may find your original complaint has faded, or maybe it's just been replaced by a whole new set of symptoms. Either way, you have learned the golden rule of Victorian medicine. For every double standard, there's a pill for the ladies. And if you survive both the disease and the cure, you deserve a medal, a holiday, and maybe a new doctor. Protection exists, technically, just not in a way you'd ever want to try. Animal intestines, reusable rubbers, and cleaning solutions so harsh they double as drain cleaner. Welcome to the Victorian age of safe sex, where the phrase "better safe than sorry" should really read "better sorry than this." If you thought modern options were occasionally awkward, try picturing a world where your best line of defense is something that used to be part of a sheep, carefully washed, oiled, and tied off with a dainty blue ribbon. Yes, the sheep gut condom, sometimes marketed as a French letter for extra flair, was the apex of 19th century contraceptive technology. They were so delicate they came with directions for gentle handling and, to add to the romance, they were designed to be rinsed out, dried, and tucked away for the next occasion. Nothing quite says passion like retrieving last week's prophylactic from a porcelain jar on your nightstand. And yet, this was a luxury. These gut-based condoms were pricey, often reserved for the upper crust and the determinedly paranoid. For everyone else, there were reusable rubber condoms, thick enough to stop not just disease, but also most of the sensations of life itself. Early rubber was clumsy, smelly, and required so much maintenance you half expected to receive a user manual and a warranty card. A few brave souls tried to make their own, with results best described as innovative and possibly a choking hazard. Then, of course, there were the chemical solutions, because what could possibly go wrong with pouring household disinfectant into your most sensitive regions? Enter the Lysol douche. Victorian advertisements promised it as a marvel of feminine hygiene, implying it could banish germs, shame, and possibly original sin. What the ads didn't say was that Lysol was strong enough to clean an oven and, in high doses, strong enough to endanger your health. Still, desperate times, desperate measures. Countless women endured stinging, burning, and sometimes outright injury in the hope of warding off invisible threats. At least the rash distracted you from the original problem. Prophylactic advice was everywhere, and nowhere useful. Pamphlets printed by earnest moral reformers offered advice like, avoid excess, bathe frequently with carbolic soap, and, helpfully, just say no. The word contraception itself was rarely used in public, whispered in back alleys and coded in advertisements as marital comfort or French secrets. For the truly desperate, folk remedies made their rounds. Lemon juice rinses, vinegar, soaked sponges, and the infamous withdrawal method, which had about as much scientific rigor as a séance. For the unmarried, the risks were even higher. Women who purchased condoms or disinfectants were met with scandalized glares and muttered prayers. Men, on the other hand, were gently nudged toward the apothecary by their barber or a kindly uncle. If you were caught in possession of anything resembling a prophylactic, you might end up as the talk of the street, or the inspiration for the local preacher's next fire and brimstone sermon. Privacy, of course, was non-existent. Every visit to the chemist risked exposure, a raised eyebrow, or worse, a visit from the town busybody. Imagine trying to explain to your mother why your room smells like a chemical factory, or telling your spouse you spent the family's grocery money on imported lamb intestines. Even when you found a way to buy protection, storage was its own challenge. Hidden in socks, under mattresses, behind stacks of unread sermons, Victorian ingenuity was alive and well, if only to avoid the wrath of Mrs. Pringle next door. In the end, Victorian prophylactic measures were as much about navigating social landmines as fighting off disease. If you managed to protect yourself and your dignity, you deserved a medal and a tetanus shot. It's no wonder so many just crossed their fingers and hoped for the best, or trusted to luck and a hearty prayer. When it came to safe sex in Victorian times, survival was half science, half stealth, and entirely an adventure you wouldn't want to repeat. If you're a soldier, you're summoned for regular, humiliating inspections. The cure for shame? Marching in a line, trousers down, while a bored doctor takes notes. Welcome to the Victorian military's answer to the rising tide of sexually transmitted diseases. A solution designed less for dignity and more for ruthless efficiency. For the common soldier, there's no such thing as a private affliction. The British Army, always keen on order and discipline, addresses social diseases with the subtlety of a marching band at midnight. Regular inspections are mandatory, and they are about as comfortable as a 3-hour parade in a hailstorm. It all begins with a summons. You're pulled from your morning drill, still half awake and mostly mud, and herded with your fellow troops toward the medical tent. No one explains what's coming, but everyone knows. The nervous laughter, the shuffling of boots, the silent prayers that whatever's happening down there has vanished overnight. Some old hand will whisper stories, horrifying, always exaggerated, about what happened to Private Dobbins after last month's inspection. Spoiler, he was never quite the same, and neither was his marching style. The queue moves slowly. You're surrounded by a chorus of complaints. It's freezing. This is humiliating. They'd better not use the same gloves as last time. But the British Army has no time for embarrassment. You reach the front, trousers drop, and suddenly you're standing in a line of equally uncomfortable comrades, all determinedly staring at the horizon. There's something about being half naked in broad daylight that makes you reconsider your life choices, your commitment to Queen and country, and whether you should have listened to your mother about joining the clergy. The doctor, clipboard in hand, is immune to discomfort. His bedside manner is brisk. Next, step forward, don't flinch. He glances, prods, scribbles mysterious symbols onto his notes. No one receives any actual privacy. The inspection is as public as possible without inviting the local brass band. Sometimes, a nurse assists, though her presence only amplifies the collective shame. Every blemish, spot, or suspicious freckle is noted, and woe betide the man who tries to argue with the medical authorities. The diagnosis is swift, and more often than not, indisputable. If you're unlucky enough to be marked in need of treatment, you're shuttled to a side tent, where the remedies are the same blend of pain and guesswork served up to civilians, just administered with more shouting. Mercury ointment, silver nitrate, and the dreaded injections. No anesthetics, no explanation, just hold still and think of England. Rumour has it that the bravest soldiers are the ones who come back for a second dose without fainting. The rest simply limp their way through the next few drills, fueled by shame and the hope that the sergeant doesn't notice their new swagger. Naturally, the army claims all of this is for the greater good, maintaining troop health, preventing outbreaks, and setting a stern example. In reality, it's about as effective as using a bayonet to cut your Sunday roast, dramatic, but likely to end in disaster. The inspections catch a handful of cases, miss many more, and leave the entire regiment united in one thing: the shared trauma of public medical scrutiny. For the men, camaraderie blossoms not on the battlefield, but in the queue for the inspection tent. They swap stories, offer dubious advice. If you rub it with rum, it'll go away, and forge lifelong bonds over the indignity of communal trousers-down humiliation. By evening, the ordeal has become legend, a story to be retold in barracks and pubs, growing more outrageous with every telling. Through it all, the army marches on. The troops recover their dignity, their uniforms, and their sense of humor. Because, in the end, laughter is the only real cure for Victorian medicine's most embarrassing moment. And if anyone asks about Inspection Day, the answer is always the same. Don't ask, and for heaven's sake, don't catch anything. You're not alone. Plenty of famous Victorians suffered and died from STDs, poets, painters, and maybe even a royal or two. At least you're in glamorous company. If there's one consolation to your Victorian predicament, it's the knowledge that you're treading the same miserable path as some of the most celebrated figures of the age. The world of 19th century arts and letters is a veritable hall of fame for the tragically afflicted. All the laudanum in the apothecary couldn't save them. All the quack cures in the patent medicine parade only prolonged their suffering. And yet their creativity burned even brighter, possibly thanks to a feverish imagination and a complete lack of reliable antibiotics. Start with the poets. If it feels like all of Victorian literature is tinged with longing, regret, and mysterious illness, that's because half the writers were living with an assortment of rashes, fevers, and progressive neurological symptoms. Syphilis, in particular, was the great leveler. It haunted boarding schools and royal bedrooms alike. Some say it even made its way into the ink of certain famous sonnets. Nothing quite inspires a deathless love poem like an incurable rash and a looming sense of doom. Take poor Oscar Wilde. Brilliant, scandalous, and fatally unlucky in love, Wilde spent his final years in exile, plagued by a host of ailments, some rumoured to be the after-effects of gentleman's disease. He may have wittily quipped that he was dying beyond his means, but beneath the bon mots lay a body racked by untreated illness, made worse by the shame and secrecy that always came hand in hand with such diagnoses. Artists fared no better. The romantic image of the starving painter, living for beauty and romance in a candlelit garret, often leaves out the daily reality of mysterious aches, declining eyesight, and the occasional spectacular collapse in public. Toulouse-Lautrec, the poster child for the bohemian lifestyle, was thought to have suffered from a combination of hereditary illness and syphilis, which did nothing to slow down his drinking or his penchant for painting the nightlife of Montmartre. If anything, it gave him even more subject matter, at least until the illness claimed his health and, ultimately, his life. And what about the royals? Rumours swirl around various noble families, hinting that even those living in palaces were not immune to the perils of bad blood. Whispers of hereditary madness, secret treatments, and abrupt disappearances from public life dot the biographies of the great and the powerful. Official records are silent, of course, Victorian discretion at its finest. But the portraits show eyes clouded by illness and faces lined with the stress of secrets too heavy to share. The medical establishment, for all its bluster, was helpless. Diagnosis was slow, treatments were worse than the disease, and the stigma was devastating. Most sufferers learned to hide their symptoms, feign other illnesses, or retire early for their health. Death certificates fudged the facts with phrases like general paralysis of the insane or consumption of the brain. The truth lingered only in gossip and tragic poetry. But misery, as they say, loves company. And there's a certain comfort in knowing that your own struggles are mirrored in the stories of those who changed the world. Their work endures, and so does their humanity. The lesson, if there is one, is simple. Everyone is vulnerable, everyone suffers, and greatness isn't an antidote to the hazards of Victorian love and medicine. So tonight, as you contemplate your own rash and recite lines from poets gone by, remember, some of the most brilliant minds in history itched, limped, and blushed their way through the 19th century. If they survived, or didn't, so can you, and if nothing else, at least your suffering is in exceptional company. Just when you're ready to abandon hope and take up basket weaving, the 20th century finally invents a real cure. Spoiler, it's not snake oil, it's science. And for the first time, your doctor is actually on your side. Picture it. You've survived Victorian London's entire arsenal of misery: mustard plasters, leech therapy, dubious injections, arsenic tonics, and so many awkward conversations with Dr. Desdold, quack-worthy that you're on a first-name basis. You've tried everything from sulfur baths to sheep gut prophylactics, and still your symptoms persist, like a bad penny and an even worse rash. The dream of a world where medical advice doesn't make you break into a cold sweat seems just that, a dream. But then the world changes. It's the early 20th century, and science is feeling ambitious. The accidental discovery of penicillin by Alexander Fleming in 1928 is nothing short of a miracle. Unlike every guaranteed cure that came before, this one actually works. No more mercury ointments or burning silver nitrate, just a shot or a few pills, and your dreadful social disease is retreating faster than you can say scientific method. The shift is immediate and breathtaking. Suddenly, hospitals are places of hope instead of horror. Doctors, who once acted like grim-faced executioners, are now smiling, offering real reassurance and actual, effective treatment. You step into a clinic, describe your symptoms, and instead of being scolded for bad character or prescribed an industrial-strength disinfectant, you receive a course of penicillin. The side effects? Mostly relief, gratitude, and the cautious optimism that you might be able to wear wool trousers again without fear. For the first time, public health campaigns are based on facts, not moralizing. Posters urge you to see a doctor at the first sign of trouble, to complete your medication, and, astonishingly, to avoid stigma and shame. Nurses and pharmacists become your allies. The phrase "there's a cure for that" no longer means a leech to the backside or a bottle with a skull and crossbones. It means science, progress, and a second chance at a normal life. Society changes too. As penicillin spreads across Europe and America, people live longer, healthier lives. The gossipmongers and purveyors of quack medicine lose their hold. Brothels, bathhouses, and barracks become a little safer. The spectre of syphilis, once enough to send the bravest man running for the nearest vapor box, now yields to a neat prescription. For the first time, there's hope that the cycle of misery can be broken. It isn't perfect. Nothing in history ever is. Some still fall through the cracks, and new diseases are always waiting in the wings. But for a generation raised on horror stories, penicillin is nothing less than revolutionary. It transforms medicine from a parade of trial and error torture to a science of healing and hope. You marvel at the fact that you no longer have to choose between leeches and leprosy, between secrecy and social ruin. And so, as the 20th century rolls on, you tell your grandchildren wild stories of the bad old days, of plasters, plagues, and poisons. You teach them to finish their medicine, to thank their doctors, and maybe to raise a glass of clean water, not laudanum, to Alexander Fleming. The great wheel of history turns, but this time it's moving in the right direction. The modern miracle is here, and it's not magic, myth, or desperate hope. It's science. And for the first time since the start of your adventure, you can breathe easy, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow will almost certainly be better than yesterday. Sleep well and thank your lucky stars and a few mouldy petri dishes that you were born just late enough to be saved by penicillin. Your symptoms have gone from mildly concerning to medically poetic. So the doctor puts on his tiniest spectacles, grabs a wax candle, and gets to work. Diagnosis involves a lot of peering, poking, and hopeful guessing. With a dash of Latin to keep things professional, you learn that in Victorian medicine, I don't know is pronounced tertiary stage. Probably. The setting is classic Victorian. A dimly lit surgery, wood-panelled walls, and the faint scent of carbolic acid and pipe smoke. Your doctor's medical library, half reference, half decoration, lurks ominously on the shelf, containing thick volumes with titles like The Mysteries of the Blood and a Compendium of Plausible Guesses. On the desk, an assortment of glass jars, a battered stethoscope, and a notebook containing the secrets of the afflicted, real or imagined. Diagnosis is equal parts science, theatre, and gentle optimism. You are asked to describe your symptoms. You hesitate. How exactly does one phrase an intermittent burning, tingling, and a rash that sometimes recites Shakespeare? The doctor listens, pen poised, nodding sagely. He mutters reassuring phrases, most peculiar, and the classic sign, while making notes in handwriting no one can decipher, not even himself. Physical examination follows. The doctor leans in, candle in hand, peering at you as though he's searching for treasure in a dark attic. He squints, lifts a magnifying glass, and occasionally prods an afflicted area with the back of a cold spoon. He asks you about your habits, your diet, and, with the practiced subtlety of Victorian medicine, whether you have visited any places of recreation or ill repute. You offer answers that are part truth, part denial, and mostly a prayer for quick mercy. No laboratory tests, no swabs, no blood work. Instead, diagnosis is a combination of symptoms, suspicion, and whatever Latin phrase the doctor remembers from his days at medical college. Is it syphilis, gonorrhea, scrofula, or perhaps bad blood brought on by the north wind? There's a diagnosis for every possibility. And the more complicated your case, the longer the list of potential ailments. When in doubt, the answer is almost always tertiary stage, which translates roughly to, you've had it for ages, so it's probably your fault. Should you ask for a second opinion, you may be told to visit Dr. Bumblesworth across town, whose specialty is diagnosing the undiagnosable. His office, you learn, is even darker, and his candle even smokier. The two doctors compare notes, usually in a hushed, conspiratorial whisper, before declaring your ailment to be exceptionally rare, but very treatable with a bit of luck and the right tincture. You're then subjected to the treatment roulette, a selection of mercury pills, arsenic tonics, and sulfur ointments, all prescribed with cheerful certainty and the assurance that, if it doesn't work, you can always try something even more alarming next week. The entire process is shrouded in a layer of medical jargon, reassuring to the untrained ear, but ultimately just a smokescreen for wild guessing. In the privacy of the doctor's notes, the truth comes out. Etiology: uncertain. Prognosis: guarded. Treatment: all of the above. You become a case study, fascinating, tragic, and sure to inspire at least one lecture at the next meeting of the medical society. Your name is replaced by initials, your symptoms by euphemisms, and your hopes for a clear answer by the reality that Victorian medicine is more art than science. As you leave, clutching a bag of bottles and a head full of vague advice, you can't help but marvel at the courage of your ancestors, enduring the great diagnostic mystery, never really knowing what ailed them, but always hopeful that next week's candlelit consultation would finally reveal the truth. Spoiler, it rarely did, too embarrassed for a face-to-face. Good news. Victorian newspapers are filled with ads for private consultations and mysterious gentlemen's conditions. Each ad promises quick, confidential relief in a discreet location that, somehow, is always next to a butcher's shop or behind the fish market. This is the golden age of medical secrecy, where your dignity is only as fragile as your willingness to decode the classified section. Flip open a copy of the Times or the Illustrated London News and you'll find columns of veiled offers, all elegantly phrased to avoid the unspeakable truth. A certain physician, long trusted in discreet circles, offers immediate assistance for nervous sufferers. Ladies, restore bloom and confidence with the celebrated Parisian cure, and the ever-popular no embarrassing questions, no awkward waiting room, no one need ever know. The advertisements have their own language. Terms like lost vigor, blood complaints, and private weaknesses abound. A reader quickly learns that Parisian method has nothing to do with art, and that London treatment rooms are nowhere near a tea shop. The more secretive the language, the more expensive the cure. Even the addresses are encoded. Just off Fleet Street, ring twice. Ask for Mr. A or rear entrance, above the chop house. Follow the smell of onions. Nothing says privacy like being ushered in through the alley behind a pie shop. You agonize over your options. Should you risk the public doctor, old Quackworthy, whose waiting room is a local gossip headquarters? Or answer the mysterious ad and hope for the best? For many Victorians, the prospect of a discreet cure is too alluring to pass up. Armed with a scrap of newsprint and a rapidly beating heart, you venture to the appointed address. There, you find a cramped set of rooms, shelves overflowing with glass bottles and pamphlets, and a man in a waistcoat who introduces himself as Dr. Samuelson, specialist in delicate matters. The consultation is mercifully brief. Dr. Samuelson asks a few perfunctory questions, jots notes in a tiny ledger, and prescribes a sure and speedy cure, often a mysterious powder or bottle, mixed with just enough hope to mask the taste of camphor and regret. He promises absolute confidentiality. Your secret is safe, he assures you, though you notice a steady stream of nervous gentlemen leaving by the back door. The price is steep, payable in cash and silence. There are no receipts, no follow-up appointments unless you return of your own accord. If the treatment works, you're a satisfied customer, one who will never admit to having been here. If it doesn't, you simply vanish back into the grey London crowds, a little poorer and a little wiser. Occasionally, you see a new ad, formerly of Fleet Street, now relocated for greater privacy, and wonder how many others are walking around with their own little packet of confidential relief. Women, too, make use of these services, though their advertisements are even more cryptic: discreet assistance for female complaints, restorative tonics, and consultations strictly by appointment. For many, this clandestine commerce is a lifeline. For others, it's a last resort before braving the judgment of family, friends, and parish priest. The discreet advertisement is Victorian London's answer to shame and scandal, a private bargain between the desperate and the discreet. It offers hope in a bottle, healing in secret, and a silent promise that what happens behind the butcher's shop stays behind the butcher's shop. In a world obsessed with reputation, sometimes the best you can do is trust an ad in the newspaper, cross your fingers, and hope your cure doesn't smell like onions. A wagon rolls into your village, painted with slogans like Dr. Wonderful's electromagnetic elixir, heals all unmentionables. The doctor inside is half showman, half magician, all menace. He offers free examinations and a complimentary bottle of something that smells like turpentine. You leave with less dignity and more symptoms. The arrival of the travelling medicine show is the highlight of a sleepy Victorian week. Children gather around the garishly painted cart. Adults hang back, pretending they're just passing by. And you, unlucky enough to need a cure, consider your options. On the side of the wagon, promises are written in twirling gold letters. No malady too shocking, no suffering too great. There's even a badly drawn picture of a smiling skeleton giving a thumbs up. Doctor, Wonderful, or whatever name he's using in this county, bursts forth in a swirl of silk cape and enthusiastic patter. He's as much performer as healer, delivering his pitch with a flourish and the practiced charm of someone who's sold the same snake oil to the same farmer 3 towns over. Step right up. Free examinations for all who dare. Ailments cured, secrets kept, reputations restored, he cries, drawing an eager if skeptical crowd. Your turn comes. The consultation takes place in the wagon, surrounded by jars of floating oddities and racks of mysterious bottles, none of which bear proper labels. Doctor, Wonderful asks for your symptoms and clucks sympathetically at your answers. He waves a shiny wand over your head, consults a scientific chart covered in random squiggles, and announces, with grave certainty, that you suffer from an imbalance of magnetic fluids. The solution? His special electromagnetic elixir, now available for a limited time, half price if you buy a second bottle for your neighbor. The examination is as much theater as diagnosis. Doctor, Wonderful dons a pair of brass-rimmed spectacles, prods you in the ribs with a stick, and holds up your tongue to the light. A classic case, he declares, handing you a bottle of thick liquid and a pamphlet filled with testimonials from satisfied customers. Each testimonial sounds suspiciously similar, and most are signed A. Grateful Gentleman. You're told to drink a capful every morning while reciting a positive affirmation, "To my health and the Queen," and avoid eating onions, just to be safe. You leave with the distinct feeling that you've just been part of a one-man show. The elixir, when sampled, tastes like a blend of turpentine, licorice, and vague menace. The pamphlet promises swift results, but also includes a lengthy disclaimer about temporary discomfort and mild convulsions. Back in the village, your neighbors ask if you feel better. So much better. You lie, clutching your stomach and hoping whatever is happening inside you is at least not contagious. By the end of the week, the wagon is gone, replaced by rumors and tall tales. Some claim Dr. Wonderful cured old Mrs. Digby's gout, or restored Farmer Pottle's hair. Others insist he was chased out of town after the vicar's dog turned purple. You, meanwhile, are left with an empty bottle, a queasy stomach, and a growing suspicion that the only thing electromagnetic was the way your coins vanished from your purse. Still, you can't help but admire the showmanship. The travelling quack offers something real doctors often don't: hope, spectacle, and a sense that your suffering matters, even if only as part of the entertainment. Next time the wagon rolls in, you tell yourself you'll steer clear. But when the aches return, and the promises sound just right, you'll find yourself drifting toward the painted cart, wallet in hand, ready for one more round of Victorian medicine's greatest show on earth. Worried about catching something in 1880? Luckily, there are pamphlets everywhere advising you to avoid kissing, standing near foreigners, or thinking lustful thoughts within 6 feet of a lamplighter. Some suggest eating a raw onion a day. All promise protection, none deliver. If prevention is better than cure, then Victorian London is determined to outdo itself in the better department. The streets are littered with handbills and pamphlets, printed by earnest societies and shady doctors alike, all competing for your anxious attention. "Safeguard your purity," shouts one headline, while another, slightly less subtle, pleads, "Keep away from the wicked." Each offers sage advice based on nothing but superstition and a vague hope that if you follow the instructions precisely, nothing bad will ever happen to you, except maybe the lingering taste of onion. Start with the basics. Victorian experts agree that public displays of affection are a highway to ruin. A quick peck on the cheek? Reckless. Sharing a teacup? Scandalous. The pamphlets warn that invisible particles may leap from person to person like fleas at a picnic. For added safety, one tract urges you to avoid eye contact with strangers after dusk. You're not sure if this prevents disease or just keeps your evenings nice and lonely. Foreigners, lamplighters, musicians, and anyone with cosmopolitan airs are deemed especially suspicious. The logic is that disease is imported by ship, train, and anyone with an accent. If you must interact, keep a handkerchief pressed to your nose and mouth, and avoid the exchange of pleasantries. A particularly popular guide, the Lady's Manual of Self-Defense Against Social Peril, recommends crossing the street at the first sign of a mustache you don't recognize. If these measures sound extreme, just wait for the dietary suggestions. An apple a day may keep the doctor away, but the Victorians believe a raw onion eaten at breakfast will create a protective aura. The result? A nation of pungent breath and suspicious glances at the breakfast table. Other favorites include garlic cloves sewn into one's clothing, a daily spoonful of vinegar, and the occasional blood-purifying tonic purchased from an apothecary with a very creative approach to labeling. Of course, many pamphlets promote the tried and tested method of abstinence, from fun, from laughter, and especially from dancing. Victorian, moralists are convinced that a good waltz is the first step toward moral and physical decline. For the truly dedicated, there's the option of a chastity belt, advertised in certain catalogues as lightweight, secure, and nearly impossible to explain at customs. More commonly, moral purity is encouraged through a strict schedule of cold baths, early bedtimes, and regular Bible readings. Schools and churches get in on the act, distributing literature with alarming woodcut illustrations of what might happen to those who stray. The message is clear. Virtue is the best disinfectant. For women, extra caution is advised. Avoid unchaperoned carriage rides, suspicious books, and anything resembling personal happiness. For men, the advice is usually work harder, think less, and never trust French perfume. Even the government tries to help, with public health posters encouraging regular bathing and the avoidance of impure company. Unfortunately, the posters feature more scolding than science, and the recommended soap is often in short supply. The city's brothels are the exception here. Prevention takes the form of homemade solutions, folk rituals, and the aforementioned sheep gut condoms, advertised as nearly invisible, mostly effective, and reusable with care. In the end, the only real protection is luck and a healthy suspicion of all advice. The pamphlets pile up, the onions rot, and the dance halls fill every weekend anyway. Deep down, everyone knows that Victorian STD prevention is less about germs and more about keeping up appearances. If you make it through 1880 with nothing worse than garlic breath, you count yourself among the fortunate. If not, there's always Dr. Quackworthy and a fresh stack of pamphlets to see you through. When loneliness hits harder than the symptoms, you're invited to a secret meeting in the back room of a pie shop. Here, Victorians trade stories, dubious remedies, and occasional pie crusts. It's not a cure, but at least you're not suffering alone. And hey, misery loves company, especially when there's rhubarb involved. The sign on the door says, "Closed for baking." But you know better. You give the secret knock. 3 raps, a pause, then 2 more, and the door creaks open, releasing a waft of pastry, pipe smoke, and anxious optimism. Inside, the air buzzes with whispered greetings. Men and women of every class, all drawn together by the unspoken understanding that sometimes the worst part of being ill is the isolation. Here, at least, nobody flinches at a cough, a limp, or an awkward scratch. The society has no official name, just a rotating selection of cheerful euphemisms. The Night Owls, the Pie Society, or simply book club for the benefit of suspicious landladies. The rules are simple. What's said over pie stays over pie. Members come and go, united by a mixture of hope, embarrassment, and a stubborn refusal to let their stories die in the dark. Meetings start with the practical. Any new cures? Someone asks, and a debate erupts over the merits of arsenic tea versus a poultice of boiled nettles. Mrs. Fenwick, who claims to have survived every Victorian illness except typhoid, presents her latest concoction, a syrup of rhubarb, vinegar, and just a hint of gin. It'll burn the infection right out, she promises. Mr. Tibbs, an accountant with a persistent cough and a gift for understatement, offers up his own remedy. 6 weeks in Brighton and absolutely no doctors. Everyone laughs, but secretly makes a note. The group shares news, warnings, and the occasional classified ad clipped from the Times. Discreet advertisements are read aloud, always with much eye-rolling and speculation about the true nature of gentlemen's conditions. Stories are swapped. Who tried what? Which doctor is less terrifying than the others? And which patent medicine will at least get you tipsy, if nothing else? Sometimes a member brings along a new friend, pale and nervous, in need of reassurance that they are not alone. There's comfort in the camaraderie. For a few hours, you can drop the mask. Jokes are told, some dark, some genuinely funny. At least the pie is less poisonous than the medicine. Someone inevitably brings up Dr. Quackworthy's latest modern treatment, and the group launches into a round of impressions, complete with mock Latin and exaggerated warnings about tertiary stage, probably. Not all the talk is cheerful. Some nights, the mood dips. Someone confides a new symptom, a failed treatment, a letter from a loved one lost to shame or secrecy. Heads bow, hands reach across the table, and the silence is filled with the unspoken promise that, whatever happens, you'll face it together. Even the pie seems sweeter during those moments, a small, edible act of resistance against loneliness. As the evening winds down, advice is dispensed alongside leftovers. Mrs. Fenwick presses her syrup into your hands. Mr. Tibbs invites you to join his next health retreat at the seaside, and a kindly schoolmistress offers a pamphlet on moral hygiene that everyone agrees is best used for kindling. The group disperses quietly, vanishing into the night, each person a little lighter for having spoken their truth, or at least for having eaten a decent slice of rhubarb. You walk home through the lamplit streets, still feeling the warmth of shared laughter and sympathy. Tomorrow, the symptoms will return, the rumours will swirl, and Dr. Quackworthy's waiting room will be as crowded as ever. But for tonight, you'll remember, you're not alone, and even in the unlikeliest places, you can find your people and your pie. As the night settles and your eyelids grow heavy, let's take a moment to reflect, quietly, gratefully, on the tangled, hilarious misery of surviving a single day as a Victorian patient. You've journeyed through foggy streets, clutching dubious bottles, endured a parade of quackery, and survived treatments that would make a modern pharmacist file restraining order. If you made it through leeches, arsenic, and a stern lecture about your character, you've earned your rest. It's easy, under the warm glow of your bedside lamp, to laugh at the strange rituals and dubious remedies of the past. But underneath all the absurdity lies something deeply human. An endless, stubborn hope that things could get better. People endured agonies and indignities not because they loved suffering, but because they wanted to be well, to belong, and to love, no matter the cost or the cure. So tonight, as you settle into your soft, disinfected bed, take a moment to thank the invisible armies of researchers and doctors who have quietly banished mercury pills and mustard plasters to the dustbin of history. Whisper a word of gratitude for modern science, for penicillin, for privacy at the pharmacy, and for the blessed lack of sheep gut prophylactics in your nightstand drawer. Because history isn't just a record of mistakes, it's proof that we keep trying, keep learning, and yes, keep laughing, even when things get weird. You're here, in a world where the cure is no longer worse than the disease. That alone is worth a peaceful night's sleep. So let the absurdities of the Victorian age drift away. Breathe deep, relax, and remember, no matter how strange life feels, at least you're not waking up tomorrow to another round of mercury soup. Sleep well, dream gently, and wake up knowing you survived history's worst ideas, if only in your imagination. Good night.